My Lord, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 25th Rank Prize Fund Awards. The prize funds were created by Arthur Rank in 1971. He established them to ensure that scientific research was encouraged and rewarded in nutrition and optoelectronics, the two cornerstones on which his business was founded. He realized that business and industry could only flourish if the best scientific minds were stimulated and supported, both in research and providing fora in which those concepts and emerging sciences could be discussed. Sadly, he died in 1972 and never saw the fruit of his vision, but he'd be delighted to see such distinguished guests assembled here tonight, even in the face of Storm Imogen, so that he'd be delighted to see such distinguished guests here, assembled here, not only to recognise this year's prize winners, but also to meet and discuss the science of their work and hopefully to stimulate future research. I know several guests have travelled a long way to be here tonight, so welcome and thank you very, very much for all coming. Before starting, I'd like to pause and recognise two individuals. First is my father, who did much to enable my grandfather's vision, both in the wider Rank Foundation and the prize funds. He's life president of these funds and planned, even at 97, to be here tonight. Sadly, he's unwell, and our thoughts and prayers are with him at the moment. But one of his great enabling decisions was to ask John Selborne to join the trustees in 1988 and to become chairman of the trustees in 1991. John stood down last year after hosting 15 prize-giving ceremonies and awarding 18 nutrition prizes and 35 optoelectronic prizes to over 140 scientists. His was an understated but very perceptive chairmanship, best summarised when hearing that Professors Akasaka, Amano and Nakamura had become Nobel laureates in physics for their work on efficient blue light emitting diodes in 2014. He dryly observed, "Wonderful news," and it has only taken the Nobel Prize Committee 16 years to follow that of the Rank Committee's recognition in 1998. Over his chairmanship, John deftly guided the two scientific committees and introduced PhD studentships, student vacation schemes, lecturer awards, and rank chairs in optoelectronics at universities and presided over 184 mini-symposia. He always did this with charm and little firm persuasion, underpinned with a great passion for science. I believe a generation of eminent scientists will be grateful for his leadership of the prize funds. John, it is a real joy to welcome you back to this evening's awards, and I hope you'll be here with us in 2030 to encourage the Nobel Committee to recognise tonight's recipients of the award. It's also my great privilege to welcome Sir Mark and Lady Walport, Sir Mark to present the awards. As the government's chief scientific advisor, I know your time is in great demand, and we really appreciate you making time to come here this evening. Not least because one year at the Royal Military College of Science has provided me with a limited veneer of scientific knowledge, which if I continued, I would be rapidly exposed as a fraud. However, from your time in research and the recognition of your work into complement receptors, immunology of systemic LE, and the genetics of rheumatic diseases, you will know what those recognised tonight have been through and the value of their research. Sir Mark and Lady Julia, thank you for joining us and welcome to the awards. Before starting, I sadly have to inform you that one of our prize winners, Professor Dragone, has been unable to travel due to ill health. We will hear of his work and we will wish him a speedy recovery. We first now start with the citation for Professor Tim Cole, given by Professor Keith Frayne. Keith.
The Rank Prize for Nutrition, awarded to Professor Tim Cole for seminal contributions to the mathematical modelling of childhood growth and its application in nutrition, epidemiology, medicine and public health. Professor Tim Cole has made seminal contributions to the mathematical modelling of childhood growth. These have advanced the fundamental understanding of the physiology of human growth and the relationships between growth and health in childhood and later life. His work has led to far-reaching applications in nutrition, epidemiology, medicine and public health, and has translated into practical benefit for children worldwide. Growth is a powerful indicator of health in children and of health risk in later life. Professor Cole has developed robust mathematical methods for modelling growth in infants, children, and adolescents. He has used his novel LMS method to construct reference curves for the cross-sectional assessment of growth data. These are now incorporated into the growth monitoring charts used in health clinics and paediatric wards worldwide. More recently, Professor Cole has applied this mathematical approach in the development of the international WHO growth standards. Using the LMS method, Professor Cole has also derived weight-height indices for the assessment of childhood adiposity and established a standard definition for child overweight and obesity, which is used in clinical practice and in international comparisons of the prevalence of obesity in children. Professor Cole developed his novel CTAR method to enable the mathematical modelling of longitudinal growth trajectories. This is of particular value for periods of life when developmental age may differ from chronological age, such as puberty. The CTAR method produces quantitative characterization of growth patterns that can be used to evaluate the effects on growth of interventions and treatments using objective criteria and to monitor growth in individual children. Professor Cole's research has focused on the statistics and anthropometry the statistics of anthropometry, growth and body size scaling, and the factors that affect them from birth, infancy and childhood through to adulthood. Using his in-depth understanding of statistics, growth and developmental biology, Professor Cole has revolutionized the way we study and monitor human growth through his development and application of innovative statistical methods, thereby improving the health of children throughout the world.
I received my letter from the Chairman of Trustees almost a year ago, so I've had a long time to digest its contents. But even so, I am still somewhat stunned to have been selected to receive such a prestigious award as the Rank Prize for Nutrition, particularly because my great hero of nutrition is Elsie Widdowson, and she is also a previous prize winner. I'd like to express my profound thanks to the Rank Prize Funds for this honour they've given me, and particularly the Nutrition Committee. And Rank, I thank you. I'm also glad of the chance to be able to tell you a bit about me and about my career working in the statistics of growth. It's been an exciting journey for me, but I do recognise that the phrase exciting statistics is something of an oxymoron for some. Let's start with the definition. What is growth? Well, it's simply the change in body size over time, where body size may be height or weight or body mass index or any other measurement. And one can take these measurements and plot them against the age that they're measured and join up the points. And then the growth rate is the slope of the line, or the growth velocity. Now, as Professor Frayne emphasized, sick children grow poorly. And for all these reasons, growth charts are important in child health. A quick history of growth. The first growth curve was published in the late 18th century, the son of an aristocrat, French aristocrat, born in 1759, and this graph here shows how he grows from birth to age 17, where the blue curve is his height and the yellow curve is his height velocity. And you can see that the growth rate varies with age, and in particular you can see the pubertal growth spurt. A brief history of me. Two important life events. I was born in 1946, and in 1970, I married the lovely Angie Pick. I went up to Cambridge as an engineer, and I emerged from Oxford as a medical statistician. Since 1970, our family has grown, as families tend to do. Here are my children and their partners, and here are our 10.5 grandchildren. And I'm very pleased that 1.5 of the grandchildren are here. Now, all of my children and grandchildren have, in their time, been obliged to stand up against a wall and have their heights measured using my trusty height measurement kit. And indeed, my children had to put up with large wall charts showing, recording their growth. Professionally, I joined the Medical Research Council in 1970 when I went to the pneumoconiasis research unit in South Wales. I was there for 5 years, then I went to the Dunn Nutrition Unit in Cambridge for 20 years, and many friends from there are here. Then in 1998, I transferred, still with the MRC, as external scientific staff to the UCL Institute of Child Health. So I've been funded for 45 years continuously by the MRC. Thank you, MRC. So what have I done over this time? Well, my main output has been published papers. I've published 440-odd peer-reviewed papers and probably another 100 in the categories of growth, medicine, nutrition, and pediatrics, but all of them with this underpinning of statistics. You'll notice they're color-coded, and this is linked to the journals they're published in. I've published in 125 journals broadly, which I've categorized in those areas. And I have some 850 co-authors. A few of them are here, and I regret that I'm not going to be able to mention you all. Well, it's all very well to churn out lots of papers, but are they any good? How does one... Sorry, I've jumped one. What are my articles about, you might reasonably ask? Well, I produced this word cloud to tell myself what they're about, and they seem to be about growth and children. But there's quite a lot there. This is outside on the poster. But as I say, you can churn out papers, but are they any good? And I judge the value of articles by the number of citations they have, the number of times they're mentioned by subsequent papers. So here we have the growth of citations. This is my first paper, the blue blob, is my first paper in my postgraduate findings, and it's blue because it was in a medicine journal, and it's that size because it's 18 pages long. And on the x-axis is the age of the paper, 0, and upwards is the number of citations. So when we fire this off, you'll see it grow. And the number of citations is now over 10, and others are joining it. The big brown statistics article is catching up, and then several green nutrition journals have exceeded 100 citations. And then the blue latterly, the blue growth journals latterly, some of them reach 1,000 citations. So that is my publications with 40,000 citations, and this red line identifies 93 papers with at least 93 citations. I can't tell you about all of these papers, so I'm going to concentrate on 5 themes and 10 papers. And the first is adjusting lung function, and this involves an early paper of mine, 1975, with 100 citations, and a much more recent paper by Quagna et al., with 250 citations since 2012. Lung function is measured by the forced expiratory volume, where you expire as hard as you can for a second. And it's known that it's smaller in older people and it's larger in tall people. And that graph there shows that FEV plotted against height increases, but then it also falls with increasing age. And it was traditional to adjust this for height and age in a particular way. My 1975 paper showed that a better way to do the adjustment was to multiply the age adjustment by height squared. And this then means the index FEV over height squared is smaller in older people, but is uncorrelated with height. And this graph here from that paper, that was the previous way of doing things, and that was my way of doing things, which fitted better and made better sense biologically. Fast forward to 2012, Quagna et al. Published international lung function equations covering the whole of life, and there's the analytical team, Philip Quagna, Janet Stocks, both here tonight, and Sanja Stanojevic with baby in Canada, and me. And this was an enormous undertaking, 100,000 subjects from 30-odd countries, but it relied on the principles that I'd spelt out 30 years earlier. These equations are already making a clinical impact and have been, as I say, highly cited. The graph there shows how FEV adjusted for height increases during childhood and then falls in adulthood. Theme 2, constructing growth charts. And again, I'm focusing on 2 papers here, published around 25 years ago, both statistics papers with 300 and 1,000 citations. So here we have a plot of weight in 4,000 girls plotted against their age 1 to 21 years. And what we want to do is to summarize the distribution of weight at each age. And we do this using these smooth centile curves. So if we focus on the black curve, that splits the data in half. So 50% of girls are below that line. Then if we look at the lower blue line, that's the 10th centile, and 10% of children are below that, and 3% are below the red 3rd centile at the bottom. Now, my 1988 paper described a way to do this, which is to chop the data up into age groups and to summarize the distribution within each group. And notice that it's a skew distribution, more points above than below the body of the data. So we estimate a power, lambda, a mean mu, and a coefficient of variation, sigma. And these 3 quantities, lambda, mu, and sigma, vary by age. So what we then do is we plot them against age. So the top graph there is the lambda values by age, and a smooth curve is drawn through them called the L curve. Then the middle curve is the M curve for mu, and the bottom is the S curve for sigma, and hence this is called the LMS method. And it allows us to construct centile curves. And this is because the centile curves are functions of the LMS curves using that formula. So if the LMS curves are smooth, then the centile curves are smooth as well. Now, in my 1988 paper, Peter Green in the discussion proposed using maximum penalized likelihood to improve the fitting. So that involves taking that attractive function and maximizing it. And it's a very elegant way of avoiding the age groups. And we published this in Cole and Green in 1992, and that's now the standard method for fitting growth charts. It's been used in at least 40 countries, and it was also used by the WHO to construct their growth standard in 2006. Theme 3, one of those growth charts was the British growth charts, and here I'm focusing on 2 papers published 20 years ago with Mike Preece and Jenny Freeman and others, which are both have about 1,000 citations. So we published these charts called UK 1990 and 1995, and the height and weight paper, that's the blue curves, and the BMI paper was the red curve there, and that was the first time we had BMI charts in the UK, or indeed most countries. And these remained the official UK growth charts till 2009, and they're also included in the Red Book, the personal child health record given to all new mothers. Then in 2006, WHO published their growth standard, and the UK decided to incorporate it, and so the charts for the UK were revised in 2009, and the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health put together a growth chart expert group, and there we are, led by Charlotte Wright, and we produced expert, I have to say, charts designed on, based on WHO from age 0 to 4, and there's 2 examples of the charts there. My 4th theme is measuring child obesity, and this focuses on my highest cited paper with Mary Belizzi, Catherine Flegel, and Bill Dietz. This was published in the BMJ in 2000, and a follow-up paper in 2007 in BMJ with Catherine Flegel, Dasha Nichols, and Alan Jackson. And this paper described cut-offs for thinness, overweight, and obesity in boys and girls between age 2 and 18, and it since then has become the worldwide standard for defining child adiposity. Final theme, 5, deriving growth patterns, and this focuses just on one paper, Cole, Yoav Ben Shlomo, and Malcolm Donaldson, published in 2010, which is the focus of my current research. And it focuses on the question, what is time? Time is a physical, but it's also a biological construct, because developmental age is different from chronological age. We can think of developmental timing, for example, in puberty, differing, being early or late. And we can think of it as a body clock that runs relatively fast or slow. So, as an example, here we have an amazing data set of 130,000 boys' heights in puberty. And what we can do is join up the points because they are from 3,200 boys, and we have 3,200 growth curves. And just a cursory glance shows that the curves differ enormously in terms of the size, the timing of puberty, and also the rate at which individuals pass through puberty. And what we want to do is to summarize these individual growth patterns. And what we can do is to adjust for these three quantities, size, timing, and rate of puberty, so that we do alter individual curves so they can all sit on top of each other. Relatively simple things, and those arrows show what's involved. I'll describe it in a minute. And so we can superimpose curves by translation and rotation, and this gives the name sitar. So this video here shows how it works. Here we have two growth curves, green one and the red one we want to superimpose on the green one. We move it up, we move it to the right, and then we bend it out of the plane by rotating it. And the end result is that the red curve is superimposed on the green curve, and those three adjustments reflect that individual's pattern of growth, hence superimposition by translation and rotation. So if we go back to our original data and we apply this method to each individual child's growth curve, and we estimate those growth profiles, we can then make all these growth curves the same as each other. And I can run up my video to demonstrate how they get similar they get to each other. So those curves have only been modified in the way I just showed you with those simple adjustments. And so there's 3,000 growth curves in that thin strip, and the white curve on top is obviously a reasonable summary of everybody's growth curve. The other thing is that we've explained, as you saw, nearly all, 99% of the variance. So we can say that the average curve and these individual adjustments have explained everything. So we can say that sitar takes a set of growth curves and it converts it into a mean curve and a set of growth patterns for each individual with those three adjustments. And this means that you can use sitar to compare mean curves between groups or to relate individual growth patterns to later health, the life course. And there are already many sitar applications that have been published. So my 5 themes are all methods to assess size, growth, and development. The first, child and adult lung function, the GLI 2012 equations. Child growth status, by the LMS method. British growth chart, the UK WHO. Child obesity with the international cutoffs. And child growth patterns with sitar. And all of these represent the translation of measurement to enhance child health. I have been extraordinarily privileged to be able to work in this fertile area of medical research for this length of time. And I am going to use the words of the Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral to summarize the primacy of child health. We are guilty of many errors and many faults, but our worst crime is abandoning the children, neglecting the fountain of life. Many of the things we need can wait. The child cannot. Right now is the time his bones are being formed, his blood is being made, and his senses are being developed. To him, we cannot answer tomorrow. His name is today. I'll end with some thanks to the Rank Prize Funds. Again, thank you, Rank. To my supporting institutions, the MRC UCL, to media guru Paul Barnard, who helped me with this talk, my co-authors, both seen and unseen, my family, and finally you for listening. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to optoelectronics, and I'll ask Professor Polina Bevel to read out citations for Professor Schmidt, Professor Takahashi, and Professor Dragone, who sadly can't be with us today. Polina.
Thank you very much. Good evening. The Rank Prize for Optoelectronics is awarded to Professors Mike Smith, Corrado Dragoni, and Hiroshi Takahashi for the invention and practical implementation of the arrayed waveguide grating. Optical fiber communication systems provide the critical infrastructure for the internet. In these systems, dense wavelength division multiplexing, DWDM, has dramatically increased the data capacity that can be provided on a single fiber, where the resulting separation of optical data channels spaced by less than 1 nanometer has improved the capacity carried by some 2 orders of magnitude. The invention and development of spectrally selective components were key to practical DWDM systems. The type of device that provided this functionality is the arrayed waveguide grating, AWG, which offers both the dispersive and focusing functions that are needed to implement these systems. There are 3 research groups who published results on AWGs between March 1988, and September 1991. The first to publish was Professor Mike Smith at Delft University of Technology. In March 1988, Professor Smith proposed a component called a phaser, which was a phased array of bent optical waveguides using aluminum oxide on a silicon substrate. The dispersion of this component was sufficient to separate a number of wavelengths by positioning a set of receiver waveguides in the focal plane. In January 1990, Hiroshi Takahashi, with colleagues at NTT Optoelectronics Laboratory in Japan, demonstrated a modification to Smith's design using channel waveguides of different lengths with bent parts of the same curvature. Using external lenses for focusing, operation was demonstrated at a wavelength, at a more practical wavelength of 1300 nanometers, and a wavelength resolution of better than 1 nanometer, first sub-nanometer resolution. This was the first demonstration of sub-nanometer resolution, and it facilitated and enabled practical DWDM optical communications over the following 2 decades. In September 1991, Corrado Dragoni at AT&T Bell Labs in the USA proposed design for an integrated N times N multiplexer capable of simultaneously multiplexing and demultiplexing up to 50 channels. The key innovation was the integration of star couplers at the input to the multiplexer and the output of the demultiplexer, thereby building on his earlier publications of star couplers in 1989-1990. Taken together, these 3 independent contributions constituted a major advance in the development of high-speed optical fiber communication systems, and this has completely underpinned the growth of the internet and the digital economy that we all now enjoy.
Yes, I would like to start with expressing our great appreciation on behalf of the 3 prize winners for getting awarded this prize. And we agreed among our 3 that I would give a presentation about what it is about. Well, it was already nicely summarized by Paulina Bevel, but I will also show some pictures and tell a bit more about it. So first about optical communication. The basics of optical communication is very simple. You start with a lamp, could be even a bulb. You switch it on and off, and you couple part of the light into a glass fiber, which transmits it over kilometers, and at the end you have a detector, piece of semiconductor material which converts the light pulses into electrical pulses. So this is the basics of optical communication. Now, a bulb is not so fast, so we replaced it by a laser. And here you see a modern telecommunication link. It consists of a laser. It's very small, smaller than a millimeter piece of semiconductor material, and the light beam comes out, and you can switch it on and off more than 1 billion times a second. So that gives you great transmission capacity. We use a small lens to couple the light into a fiber. This is a fiber, a very tiny glass tube with the size of a human hair. And there is a little bit of plastics around it to protect it because it's very vulnerable. Then it's transmitted, and here at the other end we have the detector. Well, in the 90s we got problems with the capacity. Billions of bits per second was not enough because the internet grew so fast. And what we did then is we used different colors of light. So here indicated by red, yellow, green and blue, but in the infrared part of the spectrum you can use many more, so you can use 40 different wavelengths. They differ a little bit. And so then you can use 40 lasers, and you can modulate each of them with a signal, so you have 40 times as much capacitance, but you have to combine all these different colors into the single fiber, and at the end you have to separate them. So a key component to do this is the wavelength multiplexer and the wavelength demultiplexer, and this is the function that the arrayed waveguide grating has. So here how it was made. You see here a human hair. This is an optical waveguide. It's much smaller, so I'll first show how large it is. So this is an optical waveguide on a chip. It's about 1 micron, and the light is guided here. And with these waveguides, we can make all kinds of optical components. And this is how we made the arrayed waveguide grating, or phasor, or waveguide grating router. In the beginning it had different names. We used all our names, but the Japanese name has survived. So at the moment, we all call it arrayed waveguide grating. So what you see here is a device. It has a number of curved waveguides, and we couple here a laser beam coupled into the chip. It hits the array, it's coupled into these waveguides, and then we have manipulated the length in such a way that it gets focusing properties. And here you see photographs. So yellow, this is an array with waveguides. You see the laser beam falling onto this array, and here you see beams coming out, and you see that here there are separate beams, and this means that the component is focusing. Well, this was very elementary. You cannot use it in this way, but then we made more advanced one, and we made fan-in and fan-out sections to couple the light efficiently into the array and out of the array. And by choosing the lengths properly, we can make it such that different colors are focused on different points. And here you see practical implementation made on a semiconductor. This is made on a semiconductor chip. Number of input waveguides, here the array. This is a free propagation region, so here the beam diverges. Here it converges again, and here it focuses. So this is what it looks like. And the size is a few millimeters. And this is a component that can separate a lot of wavelengths. Now we have a nice video from NTT Photonics Laboratory, so the laboratory where Hiroshi Takahashi has worked, and I will show first that video.
The arrayed waveguide grating, or AWG, can efficiently gather together the many companion wavelengths used in optical communications, or conversely extract a single wavelength from the many. You can see an unusual pattern on the surface. This is the waveguide, a pathway for light, made from a glass whose thickness is generally less than 1/100th of a millimeter. It is arranged so that the outside line is longer than the inside line. The optical signal which enters the input port is fanned out like a waveguide by the slab waveguide and then divided and launched into individual waveguides. The differences in line cause slight differences in the timing of the light reaching the next slab waveguide as it proceeds through its waveguide. The light that arrives spreads like ripples. Ripples heading for the output reach their peak together and are combined. This forms an extremely powerful point of light at the output. Discrepancies among waveguides determine the position where the points of light are combined. Because the degree of shift changes according to the wavelength, individual wavelengths such as blue, green, and red can be produced. AWGs are mainly used for large intercity trunk lines where high-volume communications are required and for photonic networks.
So the last part of this video showed already the importance of this component, and well, the number of AWGs, as we showed, it increases. It has hugely increased the capacity of optical communication system, and that's really necessary for the internet, because with the internet we use much more than was probable, much more capacity than was possible with a single wavelength. And well, here you see a graph of the increase of the number of devices installed, and it are hundreds, thousands of links that have been installed already, and each of them has 2 AWGs. And I think, although you're probably not aware of it, you use it daily, this component. Every day that you use the internet and you connect to a server at 100 kilometers distance or more, the signal goes 2 times through an AWG. 1 time at the beginning to multiplex it, and at the other side to demultiplex it. So you are all users of this component. Well, then a few things about the 3 of us. So the invention, I had the invention in 1983. My wife still remembers, I think, although not in a positive way. I had the idea during a vacation, and from that point on, I started doing a lot of calculations and elaboration of the idea during my holidays, which didn't enjoy my wife, but I hope that now it's justified a little bit. So the invention was already in 1983, but at that time, yeah, we thought it was not important, because WDM at that moment, it was not considered as a relevant technology, because, well, everybody went to coherent communication, much more sophisticated technology, but in the end too expensive. But at that time, we didn't think it was very important. Well, I started on trying to realize the idea, but at that time we didn't have the technology, so we had to develop the technology and developing technology to make smooth bands and all things. So it took a few years, but in 1986 we had the first realization, and it was this component. And very short after, also we made more complex components. So then we tried to patent it. So we offered it to Philips and we offered it to Akzo Nobel, and they all thought it was not important. So in the end we published it, and that was in 1988. And then we have been continuing. Then about Hiroshi Takahashi. So he has also been working, I guess already before 1989 on developing it, and then in 1989 they came with the first patent application, and that extended the application of the component. Well, as told, they worked at a much more relevant wavelength, and they have improved a number of things. 1990 they demonstrated a first AWG with a very high resolution, and then they made a component with 28 channels. Very important one, they eliminated the polarization dependence of the device, and they started doing a lot of WDM experiments. That was very important. They developed it into a commercial product. If that hadn't happened, you would never have heard of the AWG. I think it were NTT and Lucent who have put this component in the market and made it applied. Well, then Corrado Dragoni, he came from a slightly different angle. He had already a patent on a special type of star coupler. And an AWG consists of 3 components. It's 2 star couplers and an array of waveguides connecting them. So Corrado came from the other side, from the star coupler. And he had the idea, if I connect 2 of my star couplers and connect them with waveguides with a length, then I also have an AWG. And he also had a patent on star coupler filed in the same year as I published the AWG, and then he came up with a multiplexer patent. And an important one is, because he had these star couplers, he was aware that you could have multiple inputs. So they took a patent, AT&T took a patent on multiple inputs, and that's called waveguide grating router, and that has also, it's an extension of the functionality of the AWG, so you can do a lot more with it. Well, then he got a Bell Labs award for it. Well, you see, he also worked with, we all work with these masks and with components, and AT&T Bell Labs also started with commercializing it, and they sold these components. So that's some short information about the three of us. So, well, so far the first application was in communication links, but at the moment much more is being done with the component. And what we show here is a few of the hundreds of chips have been made which use AWGs, but for quite different applications, some for telecom, but also others. So this is just a few. What you see here is the WDM receiver, and you see the chip integrates 9 AWGs with 40 detectors. This is a cross-connect. It has here optical switches. Here you recognize 2 AWGs. This is a spectrometer. It integrates 11 AWGs with 100 detectors. This is quite different chip. This is a chip which can compress pulses for 2-photon microscopy, and it can compress pulses below on a femtosecond scale, and it integrates a number of optical amplifiers and optical phase modulators with an AWG. This is a switch array. It integrates almost 200 components on a single chip, and you recognize 8 AWGs, a wavelength router. It's just a few examples, but you see you can do much more than only WDM transmitter and receiver. It's a basic component for a lot of different applications. And in my last slide, I've shown the increase of the complexity. So what you see here, the level 1, this is the invention of the arrayed waveguide grating by the three of us. But then I have recorded the number of components that was integrated in a single chip by a number of players in the field. And you see it's following a Moore's law. The most complex chip now is made by an American company, Finera. It has 1,700 components integrated on a single chip, and all these components have AWGs inside. And I think this is not the end. It will go further, so we think that there is a bright future for AWG-based components, and we're still working to get it further. So this is my last slide. I would again like to express my sincere appreciation for being awarded with this prize, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I know I couldn't possibly summarise after that, so I'll ask Sir Mark to draw it all together, and thank you very much. A mind like yours, I feel, to do it justice.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, and it was an honour to be asked to award the prizes this evening. So, prize winners, Rank Prize Fund's trustees, you should be very pleased, I think, by the work of your committees in choosing such fantastic prize winners this evening. I was struck when I accepted the invitation to do this a while ago that nutrition and optoelectronics aren't necessarily the most sort of comfortable bedfellows. And I wondered how I might link the two together. And of course they're linked because of the Rank family interest in both the film industry and also the food industry. But actually it's rather easy to link the prizes together this year because of course they're all about the power of data to transform lives. And so what Professors Smith, Takahashi and Dragone have achieved, and I think it's also worth noting that both these prizes are examples of superb applications of science, engineering and technology underpinned by an excellent and fundamental understanding of research. And I think we often get ourselves in an unnecessary spin about basic research versus applied research. I think the prizes this evening illustrate how the greatest utility of science comes when the basic is linked to the applied, and they're both parts of a spectrum and shouldn't be considered separate. But to deal with the optoelectronics first, I think that you can see how the discoveries and the inventions of our prize winners this year have transformed the power of optics to change lives. And indeed, I don't think Professor Cole's work with 130,000 boys, the size of the data that is now used in medical research, requires the optical cables, if nothing else, to communicate with your collaborators and to work around the world. So they're both extraordinarily worthy prizes, and they are both highly relevant to policymakers. So my job is to provide evidence for government policy. It's a very straightforward job description. It's to advise the government on all aspects of science, engineering, technology, and social science for all of government policy. Extremely simple. And so I divide the work into three areas. Firstly, work on resilience, on how science can enable us to have health, well-being, resilience, and security. And secondly, I think about evidence for government policy. And thirdly, I think about emerging technologies. And these prizes are important for all three of those areas. Firstly, for resilience, as you've seen, optoelectronics, optical fibers, are now an intrinsic part of our infrastructures globally that we take completely for granted until they go wrong. And maybe 20 years ago, I'd have said, well, if the electricity supply goes, then we descend into chaos. Well, we're now in a position, actually, where if the internet fails, we descend into chaos. And so you have given us a technology which is absolutely vital and has transformed our life, but it's one that we do need to worry now about the resilience of. And there are some extremely serious issues there. On evidence, well, Professor Cole will be well aware, as I think many people in this room are, that government is developing a strategy on childhood obesity. And you can't begin to have a strategy about childhood obesity if you can't measure it in the first place. And what you've provided us with is the means of measuring childhood obesity. Of course, that's the first part of the challenge. And I well remember when people were doing the genetic studies on obesity, there was a headline in a newspaper saying scientists discovered the gene that makes you fat. It isn't actually the gene that makes you fat, it's the eating that makes you fat. And the challenge, of course, for policymakers is to work out how to change the growth patterns of young people so that they don't become obese. Exciting statistics, of course, is one of the challenges to communicate to policymakers. But the other thing, of course, is that the job of a chief scientist is to communicate. It is actually act as a transmission mechanism between the outside world of science, engineering, technology, and the inside world of government. And I think what we've seen with the presentations this evening is not only the importance of science itself, but we've also, in each case, had very clear explanations of what are quite complicated scientific concepts. And so, all in all, I think these are splendid prizes. I congratulate the prize winners again. I congratulate the Rank Prize funds for these awards in their Silver Jubilee year this year. And I do indeed hope that the Nobel Prize behaves itself in future years. But I do want to congratulate everyone. They are superb examples of good science leading to good applications, well communicated. So congratulations to everyone.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending, for fighting Storm Imogen. Two fascinating subjects, and now there's a little refreshment upstairs where you can discuss the science of that and where future research may go. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you upstairs.